Hello.
Hello.
That's right. It is YouTube time this time, all the time.
If you like poetry, if you like literature, if you like cultural history, then you've come to the right place. We make podcasts about all of those things. So be sure to like and share this video. And of course, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload.
Since we mostly make podcasts, you can also find our shows on all the major podcast platforms. So if you found this video, but YouTube isn't your speed for regular podcast listening, head over to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe there.
All right. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to Close Talking, the world's most popular poetry analysis podcast from Cardboard Box Productions Incorporated. I am co-host Jack Rossiter Munley.
And I am your other co-host, Connor McNamara Stratton.
And together we read a poem,
talk about the poem,
and read the poem again.
Before we get into today's selection, a quick note that if you like what we do here at Close Talking and have a spare moment, it would mean the world to us if you drop a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Those reviews help boost us up the algorithm and are a great way for us to find new listeners.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on so many different social medias.
On Twitter, the show is at Close Talking. I am at Jack Rossiter Munn, and Connor is at Connor M. Stratton.
On Instagram, the show is at Close Talking Poetry. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Close Talking.
We also have a whole website just for the podcast. It is closetalking.com, where you can find all the past episodes of the show. And Cardboard Box Productions has a newsletter, Unboxed. So if you go to cardboardboxproductionsinc.com, you can subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stuff on Close Talking and on all the literary and cultural history podcasts that Cardboard Box Productions makes.
All right, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 in our special Haiku Week celebrating the last 7 days of this 2019 Poetry Month. We are taking a deep dive into the form of haiku, looking at various misconceptions about it, and generally looking at how many places a little old form like the haiku can go. Before we get too deep into this episode, I just want to quickly say whether you enjoy our regular format where we read a poem, talk about it, and then read the poem again at the end of the episode, or if you found us through this special series, it would mean the world to us if you would hop over to the iTunes store and give us a rating and review. That's the best way for more people to find our show, and we always love hearing from listeners like you. In our first episode, which you can find in our feed, we talked about the origins of the haiku with the renga, and today we're talking about probably the most classic element of the haiku that's most often discussed and the one that has its most ardent defenders and its most aggravating sticklers, and this is the syllables. Because if you know one thing about the haiku, it is probably because a teacher or an adult, at some point, you know, the adults like in Peanuts where they're just like, syllables. They probably told you at some point, or you read somewhere or whatever, that a haiku is not just a poem of 3 lines, we'll get to that later, but that it has a certain number of syllables in each line, and that means it has 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second line, and 5 in the last line. Now, Connor, maven of poetic forms, I come to you on, humble supplicant's bended knee with a question.
Yes, ask away, good Padawan.
Sick, I'm a Jedi now. I'm on my way. Here's the question. Is that true? Is there anything there? Is there anything to that? Is that real?
All right, this is a great question. And let me tell you up front, I don't think there's a clear answer. But I will say it is not set in stone. And many haiku do not follow the 575, even in Japanese. So,
okay.
yes. So I've heard that part of the reason why the 575 is a little silly is because in English, syllables just like work a little differently, are a little bit longer than syllables in Japanese. I'm not quite sure. That could be totally bogus. But that's one thing that I've heard. The other thing is it did, in the strict version of the Ranga, the Hoku was most often 575. So it comes from somewhere true.
And the name haiku comes from Hoku, the first poem in the Renga.
Apparently it comes from a combination of Hoku, the first part of the Ranga, and Haikai, which was the kind of the humorous, like a lighter version of the Ranga.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
my understanding is that the words sort of formed, or the words sort of merged into haiku at some point. So yeah, the traditional Hoku would have a 575, and then the Waki, or the sort of alternating, would actually have a 7-7 structure. But after the haiku sort of became an independent form apart from the game of the Renga, even in poets who are writing in Japanese, the sort of strict 575 was relatively quickly abandoned, or at least played with.
For anyone who's seen episode 2 of season 8 of Game of Thrones, Brienne of Tarth, it comes to pass, everyone discovers she's not a knight.
Ser Brienne of Tarth defeated the Hound. Pardon me, Lady Brienne.
She's not a sir? You're not the knight?
Women can't be knights.
Why not?
Tradition.
Fuck tradition.
I feel like that's exactly the attitude you have to have towards these kinds of restraints. They're trying to bring you down. Fuck tradition. Innovate. Get in there and mess around with it. Have fun. Say what you got to say in the way you need to say it.
Let me tell you, Ser Brienne, that was the most beautiful moment of that episode.
Oh my god, she was so happy. Just the look of joy on her face is akin to that I assume spread across the first person who wrote and was like, wait a minute, I need 6 syllables in my first line. And they just beamed at the paper, and then it was all better.
So just to prove the point that this sort of tradition, or parameter of the 575 had been broken for a while, here's some just various haiku from Japanese poets. One notable one is by the poet Ozaki Hosai, and this, I actually love this haiku. One of the shortest that I've seen. I cough and am still alone.
Ooh.
Which is pretty brutal, but I love it. It's 9 syllables long. And this poet was, he was born in 1885 and died in 1926. So certainly later than Basho, who was writing in the late 1600s and I think early 1700s. But just a couple other from that period to make the point. These are longer ones that I love. This is by the poet Ogiwara Seisensui. Dandelions, dandelions, on the sand beach, spring opens its eyes. And then this one, which is in reference to a horrible earthquake that hit Japan in 1927 and killed, I think, like 100,000 people.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. He wrote this one. Corpses drift closer with the tides, where we're being kept waiting for the ferry.
Wow.
Yeah. And so those ones are like much longer than the 17 syllables. So certainly by that point, you know, things had opened up quite a bit. But even Basho had some Haiku that, you know, deviated from the 575 form.
Hey everybody, this is Jack. We discussed this in our first episode of this series on the Renga, which is the linked poetry game from which Haiku evolved, but Connor and I, throughout the course of this special series, are going to be writing a Renga back and forth, and at the end of each of these episodes, we'll keep you updated as we add to it each day. So here's where our Renga is as of day 2.
Spotting Brooklyn blossoms from the plains, a snowless white as snow.
The air is cold with pine. Or is it juniper? And does it matter?
Of raven pines for the needle to move on the sun's seething hot reply.
A long walk and a quick stop. Cold chocolate spring.
Hey, thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Those reviews help us with the algorithm and are the best way for us to find new listeners.
Do you have thoughts about this poem? Or is there a poem or poet you'd like us to cover on a future episode? We would love to hear from you, and there are tons of ways to get in touch.
Yes, you can send us an email to closetalkingpoetry@gmail.com or find us on Twitter. I'm at Jack Rossiter Munn, Connor is at Connor M. Stratton, and the show is at Close Talking.
On Instagram, we are at Close Talking Poetry, and we are on Facebook at facebook.com/closetalking.
And speaking of all of those many and varied social media platforms, a very special thank you to our incredible social media manager, Corey Chena. Woo woo! Woo.
Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Come back again.
Please come back just one more time.
Door's always open. Okay, bye.
See ya.